Hey everybody, Dustin DePurek here, columnist Andy Graham,
Yep.
coming to you from our reasonably swank Hilton hotel room post Big Ten Media Day.
Too good. Too good for the likes of us.
Pretty much. Yeah, it was way too good for the likes of us. We did the post, we did the whole Joe's on Weed Street tailgate tour thing just to see what Kevin Wilson had to say. Came back from that. I wanted to talk a little about just all that was discussed today. It was a while ago now. But some definitely interesting topics. First, starting with IU, obviously not a lot has happened that Kevin Wilson could actually be really since the last time we talked football back in the spring. And they're not, Kevin Wilson complains about it all the time that he's not allowed to watch anything in summer at all. He's basically allowed to see guys, walk up and down the hallway, and that's about the extent of it.
He's enjoyed that, though, apparently.
He says some guys, that sounds weird, but he says some guys look
not that
like
he has
Big
a
Ten
man crush
football
on
players.
Jason Spriggs, but he likes
He made a big point of saying that he does not, in fact, have a man crush on Jason Spriggs, but that Jason Spriggs looks like a left tackle right now. Now, Jason Spriggs was a very athletic guy, of course, was not the biggest left tackle in the league, as good as he was last year as a freshman tackle. So that's kind of a big deal. Wilson's pretty excited about that. But I think everybody wants to talk quarterbacks, and he didn't necessarily make any big revelations today, certainly, and they're not necessarily any closer to having determined whether it's going to be Trey Roberson, Cam Kaufman, or Nate Sudfeld, one of the three. But Wilson was obviously asked a good bit about it. I thought he had some interesting things to say. For one thing, made a point a couple years ago, his first year, when he took over and he had Ed Wright Baker and Dusty Keel going at it, he basically just said, whoever is the best at not giving the other team the ball is going to get the job. This time he was like, it's got to be more than that. Like, you've got to be dynamic. You've got to win us games.
Mm-hmm.
And,
you have to be accurate.
Right. That's the most important thing. He kept talking numbers in this case. It's 70% is his really sort of baseline, his sort of bar that you're supposed to clear, that's what you're supposed to complete. As good as they were last year, they only completed 61.
I mean, he talked about that last year at this time as well, but he really means it now. I mean,
yeah.
he thinks
he believes he can get it.
He thinks he has guys who can deliver it. That's right, and so he's going to insist upon it at this juncture. I mean, last year they threw for a nice percentage. I mean, Sudfeld and Kaufman both completed well over 60%, and so it wasn't like they fell far short of 70. But he's looking at 70 right now. That's what he wants to see.
That seems possible. He made just good points about all those guys, and he did kind of define them a little bit today. Was kind of asked about their dynamics. Said okay, Roberson's the most athletic guy. Kaufman's the guy with the most moxie. Sudfeld is the guy with the strongest arm. I think anybody who was really watching knew that. But it was interesting to say him just kind of point it out and saying, like, I recognize that I've got three different quarterbacks who have three different sort of skill sets. And, that's what makes it a difficult decision is they're all better at something than the other guy is. Roberson is going to be the guy that, if you want somebody can beat you with his legs, that's certainly Roberson. He's got some other skills, but, that's his calling card. Kaufman, as far as the physical strength, they're all good, but his biggest ability is, his biggest kind of skill, his biggest calling card is just knowledge, understanding the game, and guts.
He's got more
Sudfeld
experience
has a rocket.
He's got more experience than any of them.
Yeah, no, he does now.
He's played in more games than Trey's played in.
Yeah.
At this point.
Oh, and a lot. I mean, if you count JUCO experience, by a long shot, it's not close. Sudfeld's obviously a true freshman, never started.
Sudfeld's probably an NFL prospect. I mean, Sudfeld's
I think
really
so.
talented.
I think so. I mean, you never know who all gets on that list, but the way he was throwing the ball in the spring.
It's not like I can gauge NFL prospects or
at
not,
this,
but he
at
sure
this
looks
age,
like one to me.
No, we said it in the spring. I mean, the throws he were making look pro.
He was 16 of 18.
More than anybody we've seen, frankly.
He was 16 of 18 in the spring game. And Kaufman had a really good spring game, too.
Yeah, Kaufman looked really good. But Sudfeld's throws are...
like, and so, once again, we didn't see the summer either. We don't really know how guys progressed. What the general sense we got from everybody is that they're a lot bigger. Kevin said that Trey is, Coach Wilson said that Trey is over 200 pounds now.
Yeah, he was right.
Which is like, whoa.
Yeah, he was a little bit, he was up there already, but he was, what makes him more impressive is he was 167 after the surgery, and then when he got a little bit sick. 167 is not a whole heck of a lot bigger than me, and that's a concern.
Smaller than me.
You don't want to get down to that if you're 6'1" and an athlete, and a football player. If you're an athlete, you better be a cross country kid, and at 165. But anyway, he apparently looked really good, and Kofi Hughes had great things to say about all of them. Just said, what. We're not in that position where we're rooting for somebody where we're telling coach, hey, you got to pick this guy. We really do believe that any of the three of them is going to be able to make us, to help us win. So to kind of catapult from that,
it's a good problem to have as opposed to a bad problem. It's not having any quarterback and you're just hoping somebody can come through. It's having three guys you actually think can play, and then just giving it the proper time to play out so that you can pick the right one.
Wilson is the sort of guy that would have used the axiom, if you have 3 quarterbacks, you really don't have one. But I think he's finding out that can be untrue.
He's a guy that he's a one quarterback guy, and frankly I am too. The notion of 2 quarterbacks is kind of an anathema to anybody that follows football. However, sometimes, I mean, once again, you're trying to give your team the best chance to win. You're trying to get your best players on the field. Northwestern did it last year with a couple of guys who, kind of resemble Trey Roberson and Nate Sudfeld or Cam Coffman.
A little bit.
Coming in, and they went 10-3 and won their bowl game. And so, I mean, it's not like it can't work, and it's not like it is out of the question here. I do think he'll try to pick one and go with one. But I don't think it's out of the question that at least 2 guys play a little.
You'll see some rotation.
Somewhat regularly.
You'll see some rotation. I would not be surprised either. One thing he made a point of, one thing that really sort of stuck out to us was he talked a lot about defensive competition this time around, and talked. Obviously he's really high on the freshmen, the guys that are coming in: David Kenny, Darius Latham, Clyde Newton, Rashard Fant, Chase Dutra. There's a long list, 15 guys. T.J. Simmons. Certainly, just a lot of guys coming in. But the biggest thing he thinks they're going to bring, he said, I think there's a lot of guys that you're going to see at least being the 2 deep. It'll be fringe 2 deep at least. Guys that, if they're not second string, they're right around that area. They're going to be somewhere part of the rotation. But the biggest thing he's going to bring, it's not necessarily that they have to come in and start. The biggest thing is, he says, they have to make it difficult, make it be difficult to play. To get on the field as a defensive player at Indiana. He says, that's the thing. He says, it's been hard to get on the field as an offensive player, but it hasn't been hard to get on the field as a defensive player. And that was a bold way of really putting it.
I agree. He made the allusion to Tom Crean's arrival at Indiana. When it was pretty
Crean
easy,
has said that a few times.
It was pretty easy to get on the floor for Indiana's basketball team if you could really do much of anything.
If you could do anything at all, yeah.
And I think what is encouraging Kevin Wilson right now is that he's seeing the defense maybe start to move beyond that a little bit, to where if you look at a perspective 2 deep, and there are going to be a lot of interchangeable names in that, but if you look at a perspective 2 deep,
there is no perspective 2 deep.
There isn't, but I mean, if you look at a group of guys, that are say 22 defensive guys who may be in the rotation, there's more athleticism there now. There's more. There are more folks that look like they have Big Ten level talent level. So, I mean, we'll see how that plays out. A lot of them are really young still, but even the returnees are going to have to step it up a notch if they want to keep their spot or if they want to even play, because there's more talent on the way now. There are going to be guys stepping in. I mean, if you're Mark Murphy and you're coming back and want to play safety, you have to deal with Antonio Allen
and Chase Dutra. And if you're a cornerback, speaking of which, on cornerback, we're not entirely sure what's going on here, but it doesn't look like Antonio Marshall's on the team anymore.
Yeah, and that was a guy who was a returning starter that would have figured.
I thought it was going to be really good. Yeah, we're not sure why yet exactly, but he's not in the media guide. Nope. Jeff, the Indiana spokesman, wouldn't clarify as to why. Wilson said he's not going to address, talk about personnel until August 2, which is the first day of practice, until everybody's in. So nobody would confirm or deny anything, but Marshall's not in the media guide. You look at the defensive stats page where all the returners are in bold. Marshall's name is not in bold. So it's not like an accident. It's not like somebody forgot to put a picture in. Right. You don't leave a guy like that out in that fashion unless he's not coming
That's
back.
the only one that we've noticed. I mean, there's Maurice
No,
Wayne,
everybody else.
Maurice Wayne, one of the freshmen,
ended up going to JUCO.
Going to JUCO, but as far as we know, all the other freshmen are still slated to be here this fall. So we'll see.
Everybody else is alive and kicking. Nobody's hurt apparently either.
He talked a lot about that, but it's really one of the few guys on defense who figures to probably play a lot regardless is the guy, the only representative here for the defense.
Gregory Heeman.
And Greg is a guy that he was a walk-on that earned himself a spot. When I was talking to Heeman today, he said the subject of linebackers came up, and he goes, God, there's so many. He said, I have no idea. I mean, he's not sure. Coach William Inge, who's a new addition to the staff, co-defensive coordinator, linebacker coach, knows who he's going to put out there either.
Yeah.
There's a lot of possibilities, a lot of fairly athletic young guys that could fit a bill and end up playing. And at this juncture, we don't know, and I don't think the coaches know, and we're not going to know until midway through August or beyond.
And of course, there's good and bad in that. There's both. it's a reason to be hopeful when you look at the freshmen. It's also a little bit of an indictment of what was already there. You know, they've tried to build this thing, you know, and they've made some strides, but it's just like there are not a lot of seniors and upperclassmen guys that, I mean, they're good players, they're decent, but there's nobody out there that you look at and say, okay, that's a guy that I can rely on to get me X number of tackles, X number of sacks. That's going to be a game changer.
I mean, there's a few
And
guys.
I mean, they'll be able to push the freshmen are able to push those guys. But that's still kind of the tough part is that there's still not a guy who's established that you can look at and say, okay,
He's
guy,
a fixture.
right?
He's gonna play.
He's a fixture and he's going to make me play.
But there are guys like David Cooper and Chase Hubler who
Solid.
have played,
Again,
and who have played well
decent.
at times and all of that.
Yeah,
and so,
nothing wrong with them.
But the difference now, though, is that they're not going to win the job by default. If they win the job, it's going to be because
they've got to beat Clyde Newton. They've got to beat T.J. Simmons. They've got to beat Marcus Oliver. They've got to beat Jordan Wallace. You know, like even not just the true freshmen, but again, there's some other redshirt guys. You know, Kyle Kennedy's still, you know, kicking around in there. You know, Jake Mahalik apparently had a really good spring. I mean, there's a lot of guys that are gonna fight for that. Flo Hard and Griffin Dahlstrom, but it's such a long list of guys. But it's interesting. But yeah, we didn't even get to talk about Jim Delaney. We wanted to do that. That was interesting. That's a really long topic that we can in no way fit in this 11 minutes.
At this point, yeah.
I mean, because he talked for 23 in an opening statement, which basically somebody called it a doctoral thesis on sociology, and it was pretty much like that. But there was some interesting stuff. Anyway, we'll have plenty more tomorrow. We got to go back it again, do some roundtable discussions with people, and it should be fun stuff.
Thanks for checking in.
Guys.